All right, I'm getting the thumbs up. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out to the District 4 Stormwater presentation tonight. This is actually a very, very important discussion that we're going to have tonight. And in my opinion, and I'm sure staff will agree, I mean, this will probably be one of the most important things that the commission gets to vote on for the remainder of this year. This is a really important topic with the flooding that we have in our city and identifying the problem areas and prioritizing them going forward. Tonight is the fourth night. We've done it district specific. So last week on Monday was District 1, District 2 was on Tuesday. Yesterday was District 3, and District 4 is tonight. So just a couple quick ground rules before we get into the presentation, which I will not be doing. Sorry to disappoint you. But a couple quick ground rules is we do have folks that are participating by Zoom online as well. So when the presentation is over and we encourage questions, raise your hand and they'll bring the microphone around, because if you talk from where you're sitting, the folks on Zoom can't hear you and vice versa. So I just ask if you have questions, if you're here in person, raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone to you. If you're online, raise your hand and then we'll call on you electronically and you'll be able to speak. We can hear you and we'll answer your questions going forward. So tonight, you're going to hear about stormwater specifically. You're going to hear a lot of background in general and then specifically about District 4. So we're looking for your input, your feedback. It's actually very important. I see some folks here from the Deer Run community, which is very severely impacted in our community. And so I'm glad that you're here specifically as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Priscilla Sigelnik with the city to give a brief introduction for the presentation. And I'd also like to point out for the folks on Zoom that we have our city manager with us tonight as well, David Santucci, that's joining us. So he'll be able to assist with any questions as well. But Priscilla, take it away.
Thank you all so much. Well, appreciate you all coming out this evening. Thank you very much. As indicated, we want this to be a community-led improvement. We want your feedback to incorporate into our master plan. So your participation tonight is going to be recorded and it will be recorded in the ultimate master plan document, basically setting a baseline to where we are today. The hope is that this ends up being a guiding document that guides our improvements for capital improvements over the course of the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And what we hope to do, this is a living document. What we hope to be doing is this is our baseline condition. Moving forward, we hope to see improvements with capital projects, taking some projects off the list, but perhaps having to add additional projects as improvements are underway and as new areas are identified. However, I will indicate we have conducted a hydraulic assessment of our existing systems, and the consultant tonight will show you a model of that. It'll indicate the areas today that are problematic for the city, and we'll explore those areas. Further, we received some grant assistance from FEMA that enabled us to design up to 30% documents. This is the first step towards getting construction funding through FEMA to be able to make future improvements. And that project that was identified was in the Deer Run community. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the city's consultant with Geosyntec. It's Mark Ellard, and he'll speak to you about how this plan came together.
Thanks. Good to see everybody coming out tonight. We're going to spend some time talking about an overview of stormwater and where the project came from and where we are today, but then talk about the results of the project briefly by the master plan, and then focus in the end on what's going to come out of the master plan as far as recommendations, and particularly what's happening in District 4 with that project that Priscilla mentioned. So we're going to tag team this presentation, and I'm Mark Ellard, Senior Principal with Geosyntec and the Project Manager for the Master Plan Project. And I have with me Michael Antonelli with our partner Brazaga, and he gets the pleasure of kicking us off with the beginning part of the presentation. Michael.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening, everyone. So to get started this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about the stormwater program in general before we dive into the details of the master plan and specifically the District 4 elements of it. We'll talk about how we got to where we are today, why this plan is so necessary for the city of Deerfield Beach, what we've accomplished so far, where we currently are and where we're going. So to start, going back to April of 2018, the city of Deerfield Beach passed an ordinance creating a stormwater management program and a utility fund to that generates dollars specifically geared towards improving stormwater management infrastructure. That money is used to construct, improve, and maintain the infrastructure. Since it began in 2018, it's funded over $1 million in capital projects to date. So that's just three short years. The reason that we need a stormwater master plan is just like for any other venture, that you need to be able to plan so that you know where you're going. Stormwater infrastructure is complicated. The city of Deerfield Beach has been here a while. So in order to properly plan for the future, make sure that we are maintaining everything the way that it needs to be maintained, prioritize projects for the future, making sure that we have that plan in place and being able to identify those projects is critically important. There are certain regulations and requirements that the city has to meet as well as part of the stormwater management program, including what's known as a municipal separate stormwater system. The city is required to maintain a certain amount of its stormwater infrastructure each year, as well as to maintain a specific level of service. That is, it needs to be able to service a certain amount of stormwater and process a certain volume. In addition, the city of Deerfield Beach participates in the community rating system through the National Flood Insurance Program. The more work the more benefits that the stormwater management system provides, the greater the discount on flood insurance premiums that the residents see. So that's an important piece of this as well. And finally, we want to be able to prioritize the funding available to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck. So far in the program, we've gone through the stormwater utility that's been set up. It's actively funding equipment, material, capital planning. Back in 2019, this project was kicked off. Geosyntec was brought on board. We are assisting them in some of the public outreach and resiliency elements of this. Back in November 2020, we had some initial meetings where we received some preliminary input to help guide the process forward. As Priscilla noted, we've received some FEMA Flood Mitigation Advanced Assistance funds. That helps us to get to that 30% level for each of these projects, one per district. The next steps that's where we are tonight. We're here to receive public input from all of you. Go back not to the drawing board, but go back to complete the plan, get those grant funds, and actually implement these improvements. So to talk about what we're here to do tonight, we'll introduce the plan. We'll talk about some of the tasks and the results, and then we'll go through the District 4 project improvement project that we're going to be looking at. We'll talk a little bit about next steps, and finally, and most importantly, we'll be getting your input. So to talk about a stormwater system, it's generally that combination of catch basins, pipes, pumps, canals, outfalls, all of the different elements that you'll see along the side of the road, all of the different water containment structures that work together to help prevent flooding. The stormwater program is really focused on two specific areas. One is flood management and one is water quality improvement. Flood management, as is in the name, is about managing floods and making sure that roads are generally clear for vehicles to be able to pass. And part of the reason that we're looking at flood management is we want to get the best bang for the buck. So we want to identify what the most cost-effective improvements might be and how we can continue protection of community assets through these investments. From a water quality improvement standpoint, we're targeting the management of our water bodies and identifying green infrastructure opportunities to make sure that all the water that's being diverted from the roadways gets as many contaminants removed as we can, and meets the criteria that we're required to meet per Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the EPA requirements. Some of the things that we've looked at as part of the stormwater study include all of these different factors that play into the overall model and the behavior that we expect moving forward. Things like sea level rise and topography, the volume of rainfall that we might be expecting, how the land is actually used, whether or not it's pervious or impervious. Obviously, a park does a lot better job at containing water and allowing it to drain than a parking lot will. We'll look at water quality issues. We'll talk about some of the regulations and the environmental impacts that needed to be considered. So I'm about to hand it off to Mark, but as I do that, I just want us to think about a little bit what some of the challenges associated with a master plan are. And really that comes down to resources versus needs, right? So if we could do everything that we were able to do, we would do it all right away. So what this plan really does for us is enables us to look into the future, try to identify what the problems are, what's going to be of the greatest need moving forward, figure out what we can do today and how we need to plan for the long term to address both flooding issues and water quality issues. So Mark.
Thanks, Michael. And a lot of what the plan's about is trying to go from what you consider reactive to proactive. In order to have a plan, like a roadmap to go to the future, knowing what the city has to do to be, meet its responsibilities for managing stormwater, but also pushing improvements and fixes and addressing some of these issues. So as we get into the master plan, it's really this opportunity to look at the overall stormwater system, but look at its past, present, and future as well. What has happened in the past? Where are some of the issues in the city? What's going on right now that we can assess and know about it, but then also look to the future. How can we make things better and work towards better stormwater management in the future? So this is an evaluation of all the issues related to stormwater, and we'll talk about them. Flooding is the big one people talk about, people see. Water quality, what's going to happen in the future is also important. Since the Deerfield Beach drains to the coast, the Hillsborough Intercoastal, this idea of the sea level rise projections, that's a concern as well. So that's an example of what may happen in the future that needs to be planned for. But where this all goes to is identifying these projects or actions or programmatic recommendations can all be put into what we call a capital improvement program to provide that roadmap of moving forward for the city. So I'm going to spend some time just briefly touching all the major elements and just giving you a sense for what went into it, the information that we're able to gather and base our recommendations on. Flooding assessment. As I mentioned, this is the thing people see. There's a couple photos here of 11th Avenue and or 11th Street that it shows some flooding. This is what some folks unfortunately see in some areas of the city. This was an opportunity to look, like I said, in the past, compile and review complaint data from the last several years from citizens like you that have called into the city that has been logged. Also, we had the public meeting last fall. We got a lot of good comments from that as well. And to compile that in there, merge or marry that with the issues that the city already knows. They have some chronic flooding problems they have identified and know, okay, where are the spots that need some focus. Then we do, as Priscilla mentioned, we do a hydrologic and hydraulic computer model. This is basically a simulation of how the drainage works. We can assess the design level of service of the different infrastructure, the pipes, the inlets, the canals, some of the major channels, and see how well they're working and pinpoint problems based on a number of things. Older infrastructure that may not be working properly after 40 or 50 years in the ground, or areas where there's maybe a lack of infrastructure and there could be a need for more infrastructure to properly manage things. So that's a good snapshot of looking at the system and determining where some problems are, confirming existing problems, but also maybe looking where potential problems in the future may be. Because not only do we look at this simulations for the existing conditions, which is happening right now, but we also looked forward and applied some future projection conditions to see how it things may operate or look within a couple of decades. So this is a couple maps that kind of picture some of the data we're working with. The map on the left shows complaints in flooding areas. Now, All the orange areas, some of them are large areas, some of them are dots there on the left. These are all the complaint areas that we got from folks. And you note there's a number of them in District 4. And in purple, the darker color, is areas that were chronic flooding identified by the city. And again, you can note some in District 4 as well. So this was a starting point of looking, hearing from the public, what the city had in their archives, what they know is where some of the problems are. Now, another big part of the data that we assembled and used as an information source was just the drainage infrastructure itself, where it is in the city. So the map on the right, see all the dots and lines, that's the drainage inlets and structures and pipes throughout the city. It's important to map those out as accurate as we can so we know where the drainage systems are in the city to be able to evaluate how well they're working. Again, there's some older areas of the city that don't have as much of the level of drainage infrastructure that the newer areas of the city have. So that's an issue. And so we map this out. We have that information source to go by. Now, as we mentioned, we did this model simulation that's simulating a lot of the inlets and the primary drainage structures, the canals and the lakes within the city and how well they work and how well they're effective at, in many cases, getting the water out to the outfalls. As you know, most of the city drains either to the Hillsborough River or the Intercoastal. So this is kind of what it looks like again, but a lot of lines and little dots. But we have on this next slide a bit of a zoom in to the District 4 area. And what we did was we try to provide some good assessment in these maps of infrastructure that clearly tell a story. And a lot of times we depict this as just boiling it down to dots, green dots and red dots. Green dots mean the infrastructure appears to be meeting its level of service, whereas red dots indicate it appears to not be meeting its level of service. So if you see in some of the areas, District 4, you'll see, particularly in the Deer Run area, concentration of red dots. Those are areas that, based on our analysis, confirmed some of the flooding problems and complaints that we had received. And there's some other little areas. Not always indicating that there is a problem today, but could be leading to a problem down the road. So even if there's not observed flooding in some of these locations, it's an area to look out for in the future. And if things come to pass, the city knows about it and is able to plan ahead. Another element aside of flooding is water quality assessment. As rainfall falls on the ground, it picks up a lot of pollutants, oils and metals and greases from the roadways, sometimes nutrients from some areas. And these wash in the storm inlets and they can get into the receiving waters. And so water quality is in how stormwater may impact that in the receiving waters is a concern as well. So during the master plan, this is an effort to holistically look at the city, look at some areas where some stormwater quality issues may be present now or in the future. And again, that kind of feeds into the idea of looking and planning ahead for areas which may require some enhanced stormwater treatment facilities. There's quite a bit of stormwater treatment in the city already through a lot of the stormwater management ponds that you see in some of the newer subdivisions. But again, there's and some of the older areas of the city, particularly in the east, that were built before some of the current stormwater regulations can be more of a focus looking back. So these, again, can feed into the idea of some projects moving forward. Another area that we looked in was coastal resource assessment. And a lot of this focused on the various outfalls that go to the Hillsborough Intercoastal. One of the main items we looked at did an outfall inventory and a conditions assessment. You see some pictures here of some outfall pipes that are in various states of condition. So some of them are in critical or severe condition, and that needs to be looked at and maybe programmed into a capital improvement project program to address as part of the master plan. As you know, if the stormwater in the city drops in the city, goes through pipes and inlets and wants to get out of these outfalls, if they're not working correctly, then it can cause a lot of issues upstream. Now, we talk a lot of infrastructure and water quality, but a couple other elements that we looked at in the master plan as well that really helps the city plan for the future. One is a regulatory compliance review. This is an opportunity to look into the comprehensive plan, the local code, the flooding code, and look to see, is things up to date with regard to stormwater management and best representing what the city's needs are moving forward. So we look at that and can provide recommendations for enhancements. We also look at that state NPDES permit that Michael mentioned, which is a requirement of the city to manage its stormwater program in a responsible way. So again, we can look through and are there procedures or enhancements that we've seen through our experience that might be good recommendations to the city. But there's also some water quality regulations. There's floodplain management, and all these can get rolled into the basis of providing some recommendations. And again, some ideas for moving forward with the program to better comply with the needed regulatory issues. Last major element is just looking at how the city maintains and operates its stormwater system. It takes a lot of staff. It takes a lot of equipment to maintain. I think the city has a goal of about inspecting about a quarter of its stormwater system each year. Now, this table on the right shows what we're talking about. There's over nearly 3,000 inlets, for example, in the city that the city needs to maintain. There's over 45,000 feet of exfiltration system, those underground infiltration pipes. That's a lot to get through, and it takes time and it takes equipment. So another thing we look at is how well is the city doing with that regard, and is there some recommendations for enhancement, possibly doing some additional things a different way to help the city, again, be proactive in the management of the stormwater system. So those main 5 elements kind of work themselves together, as I mentioned, into a roadmap, a capital project program. And now this is a list of what we pulled together all the recommendations for the various different areas of the master plan, and come together with a list of needs moving forward. And so this table shows flooding projects, shows water quality projects, but also shows some studies, some areas that maybe need to look into a little bit deeper. But all told, this is a program of projects that's just a little under $19 million. And so the challenge here is knowing what to do, how to prioritize it, and put it into a program so that the city can go about implementing things in a logical order. So that was a table, kind of hard to discern where things are. This is a map that plots out where those locations are. If you look here, the blue, the dark dots are flooding projects. The green dots, lighter ones, are water quality projects. A lot of the water quality projects are near to the receiving waters, the Hillsborough, the intercoastal, of course. But there are projects that were identified throughout the city, spread throughout the different districts. The breakdown of that nearly 19 million by district is shown in the table on the right. In District 4, you see about $4.6 million there. There's also some citywide projects that provide benefit to the whole city, and those are enumerated in that table as well. So that gives you a sense of the amount of needs that were identified. Now, what we do is then answer the question of how are these prioritized? What goes first? That's a lot of money, a lot to spend to improve stormwater. So we put together a 10-year program that puts all these projects together in a priority order and gives that city, again, that roadmap for moving forward. So for example, the flooding projects are prioritized, water quality, the coastal resilience, and where this money be programmed. And we'll say that the District 4, the West Deerfield or the Deer Run area, was the top priority project that was identified to hit first. And I'll now shift to talk about that a little bit. As Priscilla mentioned, the city received FEMA Flood Mitigation Grant funding. That was an opportunity to, beyond what the scope of the master plan is, take 4 priority projects, 1 per district, the next step further into the preliminary design. So in other words, start to get ideas and the improvements down in some plans to be able to flush them out better as far as the improvements. Again, then be even more attractive to the city trying to bring in funding to help pay for them. So this is a map of the city that shows the 4 projects. There's the West Deerfield or the Deer Run area in District 4. But another one of the high priority projects, 8th Avenue over in District 1, where they have some bad flooding, and then the MLK Drive area, and then another area in District 3. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the District 4 project, the next couple of slides, and what it entails. So what we had the opportunity is look at this. There's a lot of complaints. The city knew about the flooding areas. I think some of you may live in this area. There's subdivision. And we heard from some folks, and it was maybe with some of you last fall. But this is a area that's become increasingly an issue as far as flooding. So what we're proposing is to address this in a couple ways. One of the issues is just having the more infrastructure so that the stormwater has the ability to find that way to get out of the subdivision. And it naturally wants to get towards the west, towards the Quiet Waters Canal. So it's helping it, providing some more pipes, more inlets to get that water quicker off the road, out of the yards and into a storm drain system. One of the things we're also recommending is installation and installation of exfiltration pipe, which is a perforated pipe. Instead of just conveying the water, it also gives the opportunity to perk and infiltrate in the ground where it is. So that, in addition to the conveyance, helps improve drainage. And there's already a bit of exfiltration pipe out there in the subdivision now. Some of that may be reaching its service life. So we're looking at replacing that in addition to putting new in there. And one additional enhancement for this is we're proposing to put in a stormwater pump station. Again, one of the issues is trying to get the water effectively through the system. You can put a lot of pipes in the ground, but it maybe needs also some help to, push it along this way. So we're proposing a pump station to also help get the water out of this subdivision a little bit quicker. Now, this is a map that shows an aerial photo background. We did provide another map, which is interesting, that has the same information, but this is on a topographical background. And now this is a map that the different colors shading show elevation changes. So for example, you see between the houses, some of the lighter areas, the whitish areas, those are higher in elevation. You get to the darker colors, that's moderate elevation. And if you can see over to the west, the canal over the Quiet Waters Park, that blue strip, that's the canal itself, the lower elevation. The take home kind of point here is one of the challenges of the subdivision is it all looks the same. It's very all similar in elevation. There's not a lot of relief to help by gravity drain the subdivision. So that again points us to a solution of you can't just wait for all the water to run from one side to the other to get out. So let's try to provide some more infrastructure to get it at least below the ground and start working its way towards the outfall. So that was a little bit that what drove into the strategy that we had. And now the cost for this project is estimated right now based on the preliminary design at about $3.7 million. So not an inexpensive fix. And this is similar to some of the other large in cost than some of the other large project areas in the city. Now that was the presentation on the technical information. So what are the next steps for the master plan? Well, this is one of the last important steps to get public an opportunity to provide additional feedback. There was an opportunity last fall when we're kind of in the beginning phases of developing some of these solutions, but now it's another opportunity to again make sure everybody's heard from them. We're going to get that information in there. We have a draft report into the city that's under review, compiling any additional information from these commissioner meetings that'll go into rather in addition to the other city comments, that'll go into a final master plan, and then it'll culminate with a presentation of the commission later this fall. So how can you provide input to the stormwater plan? We have comment cards here, written cards, but there's also the ability to go online, provide some input. If you leave here tonight and I should have asked this, or I should put this comment, there's opportunities to follow up within the coming week or so with additional contacts. Some phone numbers here, website. I'm going to put the slide back up here in a minute as we close and go to the Q&A. I'm just going to advance real quick to mention there are some resources also on the city's webpage that you can go to. And that's you go to the environmental services page and the resources there. And that was the end of the presentation. So I'd like to thank you for attending and going to the Q&A. And as I mentioned, I'm just going to back up and leave this slide with the context up. So thank you for hearing our story.
I don't see any hands up yet online. Are there any questions right now from the audience? I'll come around with the microphone. Yes, sir.
Before you start, we focused a lot on Deer Run tonight, but I mean, for the rest of the folks that are here and those that are online as well, this is about any opportunity in District 4. So wherever you see flooding or you see issues or want to report issues, now is your time. So we spent a lot of time is identifying Deer Run because each district has one project that is, 30% that we're developing, but this is not the end of it. There's all the other projects that we need to do as well. So in addition to Deer Run, if you have other ideas, we want to hear those as well tonight, but especially, I know you're going to talk about Deer Run, but I mean, any other ideas you have for the district, please mention those as well. So sorry, Priscilla, I just want to throw that out there real quick.
All right. Thank you for your presentation. My name is Dean Cowan. I do live in Deer Run. And I was at the last meeting that you guys spoke at. And I really haven't seen anything different from then till now. All I see is more time going by and more problems. I've been living in Deer Run since the early 90s. We have had problems in there since I've been in there and before I got there. They were supposed to be addressed and we keep getting the same thing. We're discussing it, we're planning it, we're doing pre-planning, and we always come back to the same results. It's always, how are we going to do this? How much money is it? And the money keeps climbing, ridiculous numbers, as you pointed out yourself. I do have a few questions for you though. First of all, what is different from this meeting to the last one? Because from what I saw, nothing changed. You also made a point about these on the summary of the funds that each district had a certain amount. Then there was a citywide thing. I don't understand how the citywide thing doesn't fit into the 4 districts that make up the city, unless there's some infrastructure that I'm missing that doesn't tie it into what you're doing here. That to me would become a separate issue, not just the fact that, oh, it's just another extra 1.5 million, whatever the round numbers were. We talked about the last time, the preliminary timelines for the design, and between then and now, we're still at the same place. But how long till we get this actually done? We've had issues in Deer Run that, if I didn't have a lifted truck, I was not getting down the street. It took begging and pleading to get a pump out there to get the water to drain off the streets in the area. And we still do nothing about it. We don't have any plan if there is another storm to bring in anything quick enough to help our neighborhood, as well as putting in any extra drains and things like that. I see nothing on the table for that, and I've heard no rumors of it. So you're making up a plan, but you're hitting bullet points, but there's nothing there of substance that's going to be our neighborhood wide, which we definitely do need. You did mention the pump station. Where's that going to go? How's that going to impact our residents, the noise, other factors that are involved in it, bringing the water out of there to the canal over by Quiet Waters? What happens when that canal is full? Does it backfeed into our neighborhood again? Because that's what happens on a lot of pump systems. I've seen it in other towns. It's comes to a point that this was our neighborhood was supposed to be tied into the canal back in the 90s. Nothing was done with it. And I really honestly don't see anything different now than what they were talking about back then that keeps getting pushed down the road. And unfortunately, we that live there are the ones that suffer the most from it, while the other people that are planning it don't live in our neighborhood. So we need a little more consideration, not only for my neighborhood, but for citywide, because there are a lot of other neighborhoods like mine that are under the same problem. And it always becomes, well, we'll deal with it. We're planning, we're planning, we're designing. Where's the design? Where's what you've done from then till now that we're paying for as a city to get these things actually moving? I've seen nothing. Do you have anything that you could put up there as a slide that would show even how you would put drain systems in, what drains you've ruled out, which ones you have decided that might be a good idea, and how are they going to be put in? What's it going to do to disrupt us when they do go in? None of that's being discussed because you're going to have to tear up roads to do it. You can't just put in one drain and have it clear out the entire neighborhood. Our neighborhood's too well laid out for that. But again, it's almost like you copied and pasted from the last time. No disrespect to what you do, but we need answers and we've gotten none. So can you please answer some of those?
Okay, oops, let me get to the microphone. There's a long list of questions, so I'll go by memory if you got them on your phone, so that's good. As far as then and now, where we're at was last fall, we had preliminary plans in place. We are still in the process of working through the flooding modeling, getting the information, confirming those problems. We had a good assessment of where the complaints and the chronic flooding problems were and had those mapped. We're preliminarily modeling and confirming the flooding problems. We had preliminary concepts for a number of areas throughout the city, which this one was one in Deer Run. But the other thing, since that time, is when, as we mentioned, the city got that funding, the DEP, the DEM funding, or I'm sorry, FEMA funding for the 4 projects. So we're able to then take what was intended to be just a concept improvement during the master plan and actually going to pause and that along with the other 3 district projects and move them forward in a more specific design. And so what is different here is here is the other answer your question. Here's what is proposed for improvements in Deer Run. So the orange, the thicker line pipes are where we're proposing to be able to help the problem with the flooding with additional infrastructure. And as you mentioned, with a project like this, with putting in infrastructure, there's a bit of a disturbance. You have to turn dirt, you have to dig and put pipes in there. And that's one of the challenges of these projects, is doing it in a systematic way where you got to keep roads open. It is a disturbance, but you got to try to work with the residents because they got to get out and, get to work and try to keep their normal lives. But it will be a disturbance getting that much infrastructure in line. But the benefit at the end will, again, hopefully be distributing the flood areas and getting an infrastructure faster to get it out. And the pump is an additional mechanism to get it out. Now, pumps, another question, pumps can be fitted with backflow prevention measures, so that you're right. If the canal for some reason got way up, the last thing in the world you'd want is it backflowing into the subdivision. So it would be designed with the prevention of that. Now, if the canal is up, real high and it's we're preventing the backflow, that may be a time briefly where the pump is not be able to get water out, which is where the distributing with the additional exfiltration pipe and inlets can help that while the tailwater, recedes. And hopefully that's in rare conditions. So that was where we've been. So we spent some time shifting gears to look into these 4 projects in more detail, finish the modeling, finish the assessment, all the little elements that we talked about in back in November, I believe it was, where we're at the kind of mid stage there. And there was a lot of good input that we got at that time that we also took into account to flush things out a little bit better. One of the other questions was as far as the citywide projects. So there's a few things that benefit the city and why we categorize them that way. One of the things program the city does is street sweeping. They sweep throughout the entire city. So one of the elements that was recommended for future was looking to the street sweeping program, looking at ways that it might be enhanced because it gets not only helps keep the inlets of the pipe system cleaner, keeping sediments and things from going in there. It's also a water quality benefit. There's an education element that the city is required to do for their NPDS permit. That's a citywide benefit. That's another example. Another example of a project was, it was a swale assessment. One of the things that's happened, and it's happened in Florida communities all over, is swales. Originally, a lot of the areas, if they don't have curb and gutter, they're designed to have swales, not necessarily. And by swales, the small ditches in front yard. And those are really effective at helping to capture stormwater and infiltrate stormwater. Or over time, a lot of times they fill in either just by natural erosion or by other activities of homeowners. And that then decreases their ability to manage stormwater. So another citywide example of a citywide project was looking holistically across the city and what can be done to recommend a program of trying to restore swales where possible. And there's a couple other examples, I think, related to water quality as a whole in the city. So that was where some of the citywide, and it was decided to I'm just going to drop this. It was decided to categorize those as citywide benefits rather than apply, but you could equally, distribute them into the district money. So.
You still haven't doing anything on the way you plan on doing any of this. In a year's time, you should at least have some idea of what type of base you're going to have to move the water. So everything I've heard is just we're planning, we're talking, we're negotiating. But you haven't laid out one thing that's going to say, hey, we're talking about doing French train, we're talking about doing active train, talking about doing a complete pipe system. And just using Deer Run as an example, every street's going to have 5 drains. That's what we're looking at. We're seeing how we can lay it up. You have none of that that you've
Well, but that's what this is shown on here. The larger pipes are where we're proposing new pipes, new inlets, new exfiltration systems in the subdivision. And we have been designing those, looking at the hydraulic capacity, looking at the benefit that they will provide to the subdivision. Will be coming very soon to that 30% level, as we mentioned, a design that.
What size pump would have to go along with that to move that much water off of that street?
That we're in the process of sizing. That's kind of the last step of getting all the hydraulics together and pinpointing, because we don't want a large pump and we don't want a noisy pump. It's gonna be more something along the lines of a sewer lift station, which are fairly, can be made fairly quiet and go in a neighborhood. The location we're looking is trying to sneak it in, to the corner of the park that's there on 34th. So it's not to have to acquire any new property. There may be some room to put it into that park, and it's more on the downstream side of the subdivision. So that's where we're looking at that. So
Have no impact on the neighbors on each side of the park?
no, it'd be similar to lift stations that are placed in neighborhoods all the time, sewer lift stations.
Kids playing in the park around it.
It's completely underground. And yeah, so there's not, above ground pumps and equipment that would be a problem for kids playing around.
So the open area behind the park is not a valid place to put it, where there's no residence, there's a privacy wall there, and the only thing there are commercial buildings.
Well, actually behind that area, that is a stormwater pond that serves that commercial area
There's a
behind there.
parking lot right there, right behind the church there. That is, in that back corner is completely empty.
So let me see if this guy will show up. So you're talking about right around here, this church?
Yes.
Yeah, that would require the city obtaining private property easement, which may be difficult and may delay the project. So the target we usually look at first as low hanging fruit is an area that the city already has rights to, so to
So they
speak.
have a retention pond there. They could build up the retention pond to put that in. Is that correct?
Build out the retention pond to include.
Basically using, you said a corner of the park, we could use the same corner of that retention pond area that's actually right next to the parking lot that would serve the same purpose. And again, keep it away from the residents, keep it away from children, keep it a little bit more, keep it a little bit more quiet for the neighborhood as well. And you're putting it in a commercial area rather than a residential area.
Well, what I can say is your point's taken. We can look into that. One of the difficulties we have is citing things on private property. And although from an engineering standpoint, that could be possible, we have to look at the pros and cons of that. But certainly safety of children, safety of the public when you're placing pump stations or any other equipment for that matter is a big concern. Yeah.
Well, especially in a park. I mean,
Right,
if
right.
anything could happen, we don't wish anything that will, but the further away we keep it from a park, to me, would benefit most of the people, because there are a lot of little kids in that neighborhood that really don't want, I personally don't want my grandkids around it. I would rather have it on the other side in that open area, which is adjacent to the storage place, the public storage, which is open, and that backs up to the other retention pond that we have in our neighborhood. So to me, there's a lot more variables. But again, these are things that should have been looked at, in my opinion, that we're not bringing up. Also, you haven't answered my question of a timeline. Once we do get any type of approval, when do we see action actually happening and then completion?
So we'll be wrapping up the 30% design here soon this fall. And from that, it will need to require a final design and permitting through the county and the water management district, and then the construction subject to budgetary.
Right. So if I
allocations.
may interject at this point, again, this project is estimated at $3.7 million, and it is the top rated project as far as our priority list. If you don't mind going back to our priority list. So of these projects, West Deerfield was identified as the top category, top candidate. As you're aware, the city has received some American Rescue Plan funding. So that is under consideration to see if those funds may be expended towards this project. That's something that the city manager and the commission will be evaluating in addition to the numerous other projects and priorities the city has. But this is a top priority for the city. This and Southeast 8th Avenue were identified as the two areas in the city that need the a quick response. And so what I can tell you is since the November meeting, what's happened is we've received viable potential funds that can be used for the future construction of this project. What needs to happen from 30% is we need to do a full 100% construction document to get permitting. The permitting goes through multiple agencies. After we get the permitting, then we actually can begin construction, and we would need to go through our standard procurement process, especially for a project of this magnitude, to get it competitively bid. And then we would get into construction. Construction of this magnitude could take upwards of a year or more, especially because it's in a residential area. So essentially what I'm telling you is we're about 2 years out from you seeing true relief from these flood conditions, okay? But it is a top priority for the city, and it is something that they are, putting funds towards in the near future.
Questions. If it takes this company 6 months to finish it, to finish their project or whatever before you go for the permitting and things like that, and we have a 2-year project, what do we do in the meantime? Because we had a hard time this last time we had a lot of rain. And as you know,
We're out of our rainy season right now, we have a little breathing space right now. And what we have is we do maintenance. We do maintenance on all of our existing infrastructure to make it, so that it's taking on as much as it possibly can within its existing capacity. All right. And what you also have is we have a response team. So when we do have these events, you've seen us out there, we go out there and we help to try to dewater this towards the Quiet Waters Park. What the project will do is it will actually have a system in place in the future where it'll pump towards that Quiet Waters pond in the future. But right now, what we're doing is we're manually dewatering the retaining pond in order to add capacity to the system to allow the water to get to the retaining pond in the future. And that's all we can do is response at this point until the infrastructure is in place. Like I said, these are multi-million-dollar projects. They have to be prioritized because the resources are not immediately available. And so as resources come in, this is our guiding document, and West Deerfield is highly ranked. And that's why you're likely to see something very shortly, because we were able to use a tool and a systematic method to identify those priorities.
thank you. I'm sure there's others that have questions as well.
Is this working? Is this working? The mic? No? Turns green for a second. To the rescue. Just to elaborate on Priscilla's point, the city manager and I have identified not only Deer Run, but Southeast 8th Ave as the two most critical areas in the city. And I don't know, it was semi-recently city manager where we were going to have a rain event, and he was proactive and had the response team on call. They were ready to go. It turns out we didn't get the rain that was anticipated, but the response team was ready to go to Deer Run and Southeast 8th Ave because those are the two most critical areas. So we've learned our lesson from before, and we're prepared for the next time that should have happened. So if in that event, while we're preparing and getting this plan put in place, then the city does have short-term measures to help that community as well.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Denise Bogner. I have a single family home in Waterford Homes. I was telling Commissioner, coming home Thursday afternoon, I was in the Cove East. There was no rain at all. As I started heading home, it was raining really heavy. I turned from Southwest 10th Street onto Military Trail in front of the public shopping center area there, and it was completely flooded. Now, my concern is that District 4 or District 3? Because when you get over into that crazy area between Century Village and then going down Military Trail to the townhomes and stuff like that, do you know which it would be? Commissioner.
This is your geography lesson for the night, but you were coming westbound on Southwest 10th Street and then turn left southbound on Military Trail. So at that intersection, that corner, the southwest corner is District 4. And as you continue south on Military Trail, it continues to be District 4 until Green Road on the west side. The east side all the townhomes and apartments, that is District 3.
Okay, so I guess it's your district.
Yeah. So-
Publix is my district, yes.
And then that first street coming into our subdivision, going over to Penny's house, that was flooded also.
That's all District 4 as well, correct?
Yeah, and now Southwest 10th Street, as you're aware, is a project that is coming in the very, yeah. But that takes care of the drainage issues that you're seeing at the intersection of Southwest 10th and Military, that those improvements will take care of some of those issues in that area. Yeah, and I was looking to see if we had a red dot there, but I'm not seeing one in
Yeah,
that vicinity.
yeah, your maps are hard to read, guys.
Yeah, at Southwest 10th Street is notorious for quite a few flooding issues. Once you come off of the overpass and you come in near that shopping plaza, that area notoriously is a flooded area. But with the future improvements with 10th Street, they will be required to mitigate for stormwater and ensure that there's no future flooding.
Okay, you mean those folks that didn't know that that was our freshwater plant pumping water, did not know that it was natural waterway between our homes in Century Village? You mean those folks? Bye.
Do we have any questions from anybody online? Please just raise your hand. There's an icon at the bottom where you can raise a hand for questions.
And while that's going on to the people here in person, I sat through the other 3 previous presentations. So I understand that sitting out there looking behind me at the screen is hard to see. It's very difficult to ascertain the different colors, the blues from the purples, from the greens. So this presentation will be online after tonight at the environmental services page on the city's website, and it'll be by district. So not only will the recorded presentation be there, but will also this PDF
Yes, the
presentation
PDF
be available as
and
well they can look at?
a recording of tonight's meeting will be available. And if you want to see any of the other district meetings, they're also available on the website. If you have any neighbors that have missed the meeting tonight who wanted to participate, please direct them to our website and they can view the presentation there in the workshop there. All right, I do have a from Michael Smithy. Smithy, you're unmuted.
You answered my question.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, any other online?
I'm not seeing any raised hands. Any
Any
more
other?
questions from the audience?
Well, thank you very much. We'll wrap things up then. I'm going to put this just briefly back on that slide for the contacts. And again, hearing from you, those little fight, the issue that you mentioned, it wouldn't hurt to get that in there. Those issues, again, they're, as Priscilla mentioned, they're all logged in the master plan and documented in there and, take into account. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Commissioner, do you want to say anything?
Oh,
put you on the
giving
spot.
the politician the microphone always is a bad idea. So, but to the residents' point, you remember with the Southwest 10th Street with the comment cards that they're always asking for at the public meetings. This is the same idea tonight. So all of the public feedback and input is what we're looking for to incorporate in the master plan. So there's no comment that is too small or no area that's too small to be incorporated. So please, make those comments either on the cards in the back or online so that all can get incorporated into the master plan for future considerations. Because it's not just the project tonight, it's all the projects, for the 10 years going forward. The $19 million we don't have in our city budget to do everything at once. So we're gonna have to spread this out over, a roughly 10-year period. And that's why we have the priority list going forward. So helping us to identify what is a priority and not is why we're having these meetings for your comments that may move some of the projects up and down based upon the feedback that we get. So it's very important. That's why I wasn't understating at the beginning of this meeting how important tonight and these subsequent meetings actually are into the prioritization of the projects going forward. So you're all paying for this and you should have an input as to what gets done when. So I really appreciate everybody coming out and listening, and you have the contacts to make the comments going forward. So thank you.
Well, thank you again for your participation. Again, just visit our environmental services webpage on the City of Deerfield Beach website for the presentation and a copy of the workshop.
Sending out a notification to all the residents when that's available and how to see it.
It'll be available as of tomorrow. Mhm.
You know, will you be please sending out information to all of the residents like Commissioner does on his District 4 info? Send out.
I'll put it in my newsletter for sure. Absolutely. That contact information. Thanks, everyone.